Hello, this is Daniel Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. Now, for the last of my initial set of CitizenCon videos, I'm going to go over my thoughts about the informal closing keynote. I guess that's the best description of the quirky final 2 hours of the day. When I met Chris at the Los Angeles Bar Citizen World Tour event, I was the guy in the Panama hat, I could tell that Chris loved talking with people about the game. Sandy had to come by often with decreasing subtleness to remind Chris that they still needed to pack and get to LAX to catch their flight to London. So that explains why my first reaction was, well, I guess Chris doesn't have a flight to catch. But honestly, it had been so long since we had seen either of these two on camera that it was easy to forgive them for long-windedness, and I suspect that the CitizenCon crew felt the same way. But I'm not going to give 2 hours of reaction, so I'm going to have to concentrate on the places where they showed and not just told. But I will start with saying that I feel justified in saying that spoilers were not a satisfactory excuse for their silence. The 2 hours was successfully spoiler-free. See, that wasn't so hard. And I will add that their frame for their presentation, that these were going to be the spillover benefits to the Squadron 42 work for the PU. Persistence Universe players, this is not a money pit that you will never see anything out of. It is a money pit that we'll see plenty from, and predictably complain about much of it. And much of those complaints started with, it's been 10 years and they still haven't figured out. And I will disagree. It means that they are going to not be trapped by tech debt. Technical debt is a term coined by Ward Cunningham, a pioneer in agile development theory. It says go ahead and do the early work as best as seems at the time, knowing that at the end things will change or be discovered and you'll have to budget to refactor that work to pay off the debt. If you don't pay off the tech debt by refactoring, you will be trapped with what seemed best 10 years ago. Does that mean that you can get stuck in perpetual development as you continually refactor the old stuff? As I said in a prior video, that is a common criticism by agile development detractors. So let's look at the refactoring of the sensor and interaction systems. Now, these notifiers are just the right thing for beginning players, but way too annoyingly intrusive for the experienced player. So here is the challenge. How do you have these adapt to both experience levels while still in the process have the beginner level teach what the experience level is? But before that, something else. If I am a gamepad user, F is not my interaction key. The Y button is. And personally, I suggest that users with a 5 or 6 button mouse map interact from the F key to one of those thumb buttons on the mouse. So if I've changed my interaction to mouse button 6, does it still show F? It shouldn't. Now imagine in the center of the circle a tiny symbol, let's say a hand for grab, an I for examine, a box for store, whatever. It doesn't have to be obvious because the system will teach the player if it isn't. So start like this. Then after 20 interactions using the F key or whatever, lose the big F and have just the word and the icon inside the solid or broken circle. Then after, let's say, 20 uses of the grab default, the word is lost and is just the solid or broken circle with a little hand icon inside it. And that's the experienced user version. Now, if the player has been away from the game for, say, 2 months, then revert back to the beginner level and start the process again. The same thing for larger items. Have a symbol for a datapad at the start and have the datapad symbol along with the word datapad, and then after enough displays, just the datapad symbol. Have a symbol for slaver, say a whip, or a generic dagger for enemy, and then, after enough displays, switch from the symbol plus the word to just the symbol. But again, get the experienced player's screen as uncluttered as possible to remove arcadey things that draw attention from the continuous presence immersion. The next was the demonstration of the improved traversal, such as being able to jump onto ladders and have more control over jump and grab. And this is the payoff, is the ability to interact without jumping to a separate mode. In other words, it was clear that to jump and grab onto a ledge or ladder, we click on the ledge, ladder, etc. that we want to grab. But with the ability to look around more, is this going to require some sort of eye or face tracking like Tobil, Track IR, or FOIP? We would seem to still need the mouse to control our movement facing and the WASD keys for movement direction, but since FOIP and the rest are becoming increasingly popular, I'm okay with this. Next, they demonstrated the new mode of EVA movement described as push-pull. And okay, fellow physics nerds, is this accurate? And having given the laws of Newtonian physics a good review in conjunction with it, I have to conclude that it is less realistic than the thruster backpack, which apparently we are going to still have available, but more realistic than the tractor beam. So first of all, I think we can all agree that there is no advantage or disadvantage to the Superman pose. There is no air friction either way, so you aren't going to be going faster or slower or anything. Now, in this example, we had thrusters, and in this example, they had air when they used the Superman pose. But without either of those, is it really wise to be leading with your faceplate? My point exactly. The problem is that in order to get any friction off of a surface, you have to press against it. And Newton's second law says that if you are pressing against the surface, then the surface presses back and you will float away from the surface. When the zero-G push-pull was first described to us, it was said that the suit thrusters would be pressing you against the surface. But Chris's presentation said that the thrusters would no longer be just in the suit. Thrusters would require a special backpack. So in order for this to work, your gloves would have to have some sort of very sticky fingers, ideally with a stickiness that can be turned on and off in a moment. Now, is that a reasonable thing for 30th century technology? Yes, certainly less of a technology leap than a tractor beam, but honestly, the magnetic boots of the Expanse would have been a much more reasonable solution.
Not bad. Right.
Gravlev trolleys make so much sense that it made me wonder why they bothered with all the work making the wheeled variety in the first place. Something they said that was almost a throwaway line, but I was relieved to hear, was being said that you could snap to the cargo grid. That's going to be essential with our being able to load our ships to the maximum rated capacity after the cargo refactor. The mini-map being on the Mobiglass was basically being a refactor of the HoloViewer. All seemed fine to me, and no complaints. The AI presentation was very interesting, particularly the description of how the combat opponents would have different personalities and how each run might have a different combination of personalities among the opponents, and thus an entirely different result. I have caution, though, because we have seen a lot of examples of sophisticated NPC AI in theory, but when they get put in the PU, we wind up with NPCs standing on chairs in T-poses because the server was too busy and put the AI into idle. But if they can exhibit this behavior under the complexities of server meshing, then I'm going to be a happy camper. Now the thing that I think a lot of people came here for, and I've taken longer to make this video to be sure I've really fully considered it, and that is the skill system. So let me start with a concrete example of why I think this is a bad idea. Avenger 1 goes out and takes on all challengers, often in a particularly ordinary craft. And the opponents he's defeated, usually decisively, and the people who watch his contact respect him afterwards because within the framework of a computer game, he won fairly by being better at it. But throw in the suspicion, just the suspicion, that maybe, just maybe, he won not by being better, but having a half G higher blackout tolerance, and the respect is gone and replaced with resentment. And once there, it can't be retrieved. And it doesn't just apply to PvP. Darts players compare their scores even though they aren't throwing the darts at each other. But if the club allowed people that had been playing longer to stand an inch closer, nobody would regard it as fair. Traders will look at who is being more successful and feel that it's not because they're being smarter or more efficient traders, but because the other guy might be able to lift more and move faster. And all of this reflects both on the internal feelings about how players feel about each other and how prospective players feel about the game in total. MMOs in general have a bad rep for having a sign on the door saying casual players need not apply. But layering a skill use advancement system on it, CIG would add their own stamp of approval to that sign. And for what? Was there anything in their description of grinding up your strength or agility or whatever that seemed like fun? The best PvP games are good because you feel you are putting your skills against the other player's skills. But layer this artificial layer of statistics and PvP becomes CVC, character versus character. And even PvE games become CVE, character versus environment. which true, you built the character, but there is still this layer of isolation between your skills and your success. Then, once you have this layer of statistics between the player and success, the temptation becomes inevitable to have magic items. Well, they won't actually call them magic items, of course, but they'll be alien technology or advanced research or secret military tech or, well, magic. Just reference Clark's Law if you are confused. The problem is that with the character, and not yourself as the actual performer, your character doesn't just be your presence in the game, but also a rack on which you hang your magic items. And that makes corpse runs less optional and more mandatory and more of a nuisance, and it makes the calls for automatic protection and return of your advanced technology items more strident. And all of this just detracts from the diegetic presence immersion ideal that you are you and you are there. And now comes the tough part. My promise not to complain without a suggestion on how to do it better. And the simple solution is don't. Just don't do it. Except that a single-player standalone game is not the perfect test bench for a multiplayer mechanics, and this thing should only be for Squadron 42. And in fact, I'm not all that sure it's a sensible mechanic for Squadron 42, since Squadron presumes that you already are finished with the training to become a hotshot fighter pilot, so why is there a progression to become one? Just apply that programming time to something actually beneficial to the game and get finished sooner. Don't add months to the finish time for something that nobody asked for, was never promised, in fact exactly the opposite, and won't actually help the game. Anyhow, if there is some sort of dead-set determination to continue on a skill-use progression path, then do the following. Distinguish between hard and soft effects, and only apply soft effects to any action that conveys even a remote chance of a competitive advantage. Let me describe those terms with an example. In G-forces, there is a point at which you pass out from taking too many Gs. That is a hard limit, and changing it would be a hard effect. On the other hand, there is a point where your vision starts to become monochrome and you start gasping, maybe even sound a little nauseous, but you can still pilot through it just as well. So those are soft limits, and changing when they occur, a soft effect. So somebody who has extra G-force tolerance might be able to go harder without gasping or vision changes, but the hard limit of when they pass out is the same. Similarly, the character with more strength might walk steadier under load or with less straining noises, but the actual speed and weight, the hard limits, would be the same. Same thing goes with the techniques. Sure, having a takedown animation that makes you look like Arya Stark if you've done it enough, but the hard limit, the chance of success, and the total time to complete the move would be unchanged. And if that makes you think it might not be worth the effort for such constrained results, then yes, by all means, just don't do it. And now for an update on our Grow the Channel ship giveaway. As of recording, we are at 93% of the subscriber goal and 100% of the membership goal, or the IAE Expo, whichever happens first, to give away to some lucky player their choice of the Anvil Liberator, the ship-shipping ship for shipping your ships, or the Misk Odyssey, that long-length look-ahead launcher lorry. One entry per video. Members, prior to the publication of the winning video, are entered automatically, and if the winner is a member as of the publication date of the winning video and at the drawing time, remember that if you've let your membership expire, they will win both the Liberator and the Odyssey. For non-members, just subscribe and comment somehow including the secret word. And the secret word for this video is the author of the law that I referenced in relation to technology and magic. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.